The observation team on Forward Operating Base Sentinel had a name for vessels like the one now drifting on the edge of the system. They called them coffin ships. They were the ghostly remnants of defeated species, automated arcs launched in a final, desperate act of survival. This one was no different. Its hull was a patchwork of brittle, unknown alloys, scarred by micrometeorites and the radiation of 1,000 suns. It had no visible weapons, no shields, no discernible propulsion. It was a tomb. Commander Theron of the Galactic Concordium watched the holographic display with the detached weariness of a veteran who had seen too many of these funerals. Around him, the bridge of the Vigilant hummed with quiet efficiency. "Life signs?" he asked, not expecting much. "Faint, sir," a young Colonian officer, yet her shell ridges tight with concentration, reported. "Very faint. Hibernation signatures, maybe a dozen at most. The rest are just echoes." Theron nodded. A dozen survivors out of what was likely a population in the billions. The math of galactic conflict was always brutally simple. "Hail them. Standard first contact protocols. Let's not spook them." The attempt was made. Static. Then a series of clicks and whistles, completely unintelligible. The universal translator, a marvel of Concordium science that could decipher almost any language after a few moments of analysis, spun its wheels and came up with nothing. "It's not a language barrier, Commander," the communications officer said, his antennae drooping. It's a data format we've never seen. It's not based on any logical progression we can track. It's almost artistic." Theron frowned. That was new. "All right. Prepare a boarding party. Full environmental suits. I want a xenobiologist and a linguist. If they're alive, we need to know who they are and what happened to them." The boarding party, a mix of several Concordium species, crossed the void in a small shuttle. They clamped onto the coffin ship's hull and cut their way through an airlock that had long since fused shut. Inside, it was dark, cold, and silent. The gravity was a fraction of standard, making their movements feel dreamlike and clumsy. Their helmet lights cut through the darkness, illuminating corridors that were surprisingly organic. It wasn't the sleek metal of the Concordium or the crystalline structures of the Xylos. It was a ship that felt grown, with walls that had the texture of petrified wood and a faint, the dusty smell in their recycled air. They found the hibernation chamber. It was a vast, spherical room lined with countless alcoves, most of them dark and empty. In the center, on a raised dais, were 12 pods. They were different from the others, simpler, more utilitarian. Through the frosted viewport of one, they saw her. She was small. That was the first thought that crossed Lieutenant Commander Valerius's mind. Small and fragile-looking. The xenobiologist, a being named Cathar, whose species resembled a bipedal insect, leaned in close. "Mammalian," Cathar's voice buzzed over the comm. "Bipedal. Limited dermal protection. No natural armor, claws, or fangs. Positively defenseless." The pod cycled open with a soft hiss, releasing a plume of ancient frozen air. The woman inside stirred. Her eyes, a startling shade of blue, fluttered open. She looked around, her gaze unfocused, and then she saw the armored figures looming over her. Any sane being, waking from centuries of sleep to find strange aliens in a cold, dead ship, would have screamed. She didn't. She just stared, her expression a mixture of profound sadness and a kind of grim acceptance. Her name, they learned through painstaking effort over the following weeks, was Ava. She was human. Her species, she explained in a voice that was always quiet, always sad, had been at war. A long, terrible war with an enemy they called the Mermid. They had lost. The Mermid hadn't just wanted conquest, they wanted eradication. They saw all other life as a contaminant. The coffin ship wasn't a last-ditch weapon. It was a lifeboat, carrying the seeds of humanity, the genetic and cultural archives of their entire race. And she was one of the caretakers. The Concordium listened, their many hearts going out to her. They offered asylum. They offered a place on a peaceful, resource-rich world where she and the other survivors could rebuild. They saw her as a refugee, a living relic of a tragedy. They treated her with kid gloves. They showed her their cities of gleaming spires, their peaceful gardens, their mighty but defensive fleet. Eva watched it all with those sad blue eyes. She saw their kindness. She also saw their weakness. One day, during a tour of the Vigilance Marine contingent, she was introduced to their latest tactical armor. It was a masterpiece of Concordium engineering. Powered servos for enhanced strength, a multi-layered energy shield, and composite plating that could withstand a direct hit from a light starship cannon. And it was the pinnacle of defensive technology, designed to protect the wearer at all costs. The captain in charge of the contingent, a proud, hulking being named Grail, was eager to show it off. He pointed to a training dummy clad in a previous generation of the armor. "Observe," he rumbled, his voice a deep vibration. He raised a sidearm, a standard-issue plasma pistol. He fired. The bolt splashed against the dummy's chest, the energy dissipating harmlessly across the shields. Now, this new model, he gestured to the suit standing on a display pedestal. It can withstand 3 times that. Eva, who had been silent throughout the demonstration, finally spoke. "May I?" she asked, pointing to the pistol. Growl was amused. This tiny, unarmed creature wanted to handle a weapon. He handed it over with a condescending chuckle. And the other officers watched, their expressions a mix of curiosity and mild concern. Eva hefted the pistol. It was light in her hand. She examined it, not like a soldier inspecting a tool, but like a sculptor studying a flawed piece of clay. She looked at the new armor on the pedestal, then back at the pistol. "The power cell is crystalline," she said, her voice soft, almost to herself. "It discharges energy in a harmonic wave. The armor's shield generator, it's designed to counter that specific frequency. It creates a resonance cascade, scattering the energy." She looked at Growl. "It's a very elegant defense." Growl puffed up with pride. "Thank you. Our finest minds—" She cut him off. "But your finest minds didn't fight the mermaid." She handed the pistol back to him. Then she did something that made every being in the room freeze. She took a single, slow step forward. She raised her hand, her bare, pale, unprotected hand, and she placed it gently on the chest plate of the new armor. Her fingers barely grazed the polished metal. It was the lightest of touches, a gesture that seemed more like a caress than an attack, and the armor exploded. There was no searing blast, no fireball. It was a silent, instantaneous disintegration. The chest plate shattered into a million glittering fragments that hung in the air for a split second before pattering to the deck like metallic rain. The servos in the arms seized and sparked. The helmet's visor went dark. The entire suit, the pinnacle of Concordium defensive technology, collapsed into a heap of junk. A profound, terrified silence fell over the room. Growl stared, his jaw hanging open. And the other officers took an involuntary step back. The only sound was the soft tinkle of the last few fragments settling on the metal floor. Eva withdrew her hand. She looked at the stunned faces around her, and for the first time, the profound sadness in her eyes was replaced by something else. It wasn't anger. It wasn't triumph. It was a deep, weary disappointment. "In the last 100 years of our war," she said, her quiet voice now carrying in the stunned silence, "we stopped building armor to protect us from energy weapons. The Myrmidon learned to adapt their firing frequencies in microseconds. A static defense was a death sentence." She gestured to the ruined suit. "This would have lasted a second against a single Myrmidon drone. They wouldn't have needed to shoot it. They would have just touched it." She looked at the captain. We stopped relying on things that could be hacked or harmonized with or turned against us. We learned that the only thing you can truly rely on is what you can do with your own two hands in the moment. A Myrmidon hunter drone can analyze a power grid, find its frequency, and overload it with a pulse, but it can't predict a rock thrown at its optical sensor. It can't calculate for a fist hitting a joint at just the right angle. It can't fathom a being that is willing to sacrifice a hand to destroy its face. She turned to leave, then paused. She looked back at the pile of scrap that was once their finest armor. She hardly touched him. And his armor exploded, she murmured, as if quoting a line from a children's story. That's what they used to say about us near the end. It wasn't magic. It was just desperation. And an understanding that the best weapon isn't the one that has the most power. It's the one that your enemy doesn't even know is a weapon. She left the training room, leaving behind a group of beings who had just had their entire understanding of warfare, of strength, and of the small, sad woman in their midst, utterly and irrevocably shattered. They had offered her protection. They now realized with a chilling clarity that they had just witnessed the true nature of the creature they had sought to save. They hadn't found a refugee. They had found a survivor of a war so terrible, so advanced, that it had evolved past the need for armor and had turned the human body itself into the most unpredictable and dangerous weapon in the known universe.